Hello, and welcome back to Hardy's Books. Now today, as the first Friday of the month, should have been our book club video for A Little Hatred by J. Abercrombie, but we're going to defer that 1 week because today I want to talk about Demon in White, the third book in the study sequence by Christopher Ruocchio. Now I finished this book a few weeks ago, actually, and I've needed that time to think about it because my feelings on this one are perhaps not as straightforward as they were for Howling Dark, which is already and still my book of the year. This one, I've got a few more thoughts. Let's unpack them a bit, okay? Let's break it down. Let's open up this big old sun, look inside and go, do I want to eat all of that? I'm assuming if you clicked on this video, then you have already read Empire of Silence and Howling Dark, or you don't care about spoilers for those two books. So bear in mind that we're joining the story in the third book in the series. I'm going to refer to things that happened already. So just be warned. To give you the grounding of the story, we're jumping forward again, I think about 100 years, and Hadrian has spent a lot of this time in the court of the emperor, and I was expecting, going into this book, that this book was mostly going to be about political intrigue, that it was going to be about what Hadrian's place is in this society, in the Solon Empire, how he relates to the emperor, and how being this kind of hero with folk tales kind of being told around him, how that was going to affect his standing. It definitely touched a lot of those places, but I was surprised at how much actually happens outside of Forum, which is the kind of home base of the emperor. And this is because Hadrian has to occasionally absent himself in this story from Forum, either because of self-preservation or because of direct decree. This gives the book, I guess, a bit more kind of ground to cover. It allows the book to go to more places and to explore more ideas. I think that's a good setup. Part of the kind of disappointment, perhaps, of Empire of Silence was that we didn't really get to see much of the universe, and then Howling Dark did take us to lots of different places. And then this time we're going to lots of different places within the Solon Empire. So we're not talking about the extrasolarians, we're talking outpost planets and traveling between them. It fills in some gaps in our understanding of the world, and that, I think, was needed at this point. By the end of Demon in White, you have a pretty clear understanding of the entire universe that this story, this epic saga, takes place in. And the travel between these places actually, I think, plays even more of a role in this book. We finally get explained one of the mechanics of this faster than light travel because, according to the laws of general relativity, the faster you go, as your speed approaches light speed, time is supposed to slow down. And so in this book we understand that as you travel faster than light, there isn't that same time dilation going on, which is interesting. I can see the storytelling potential in writing out that kind of law of physics. I guess the setup for Hadrian in this tale, as well as being in this kind of dangerous social environment, he also has a want deferred, which is kind of a classic storytelling technique that keeps you reading. And this want that is deferred is his desire to do research into earlier humanity's encounters with this creature being god, maybe, called the Quiet, which he has encountered before in the ruins on Amesh, and in that weird kind of in-between state when he was killed on the Demiurge. So he wants to do this research, but he is not being given access to the information he needs. That is quite good. It kind of keeps him focused and frustrated. It always makes for good character work when their character is focused and frustrated. So moving on to the plot of this book. This time we have another clear 3-act structure. So in Act 1, where the book starts, Hadrian is sent away, and again, that was kind of a bit of a surprise. Immediately you think he's going to have more kind of court stuff to do, but no, he's sent away on this mission that he's supposed to fail at. And accompanying him is Prince Alexander, who is one of the emperor's many children. And I guess you could say this is new area we get to see Hadrian operate in, is as a mentor figure to Prince Alexander. In the previous books you've seen all of his wise kind of teachings, and now he gets to finally have someone to foist them upon. And that's an interesting dynamic, and I think that works pretty well. I will say the foreshadowing for what happens between Hadrian and Prince Alexander, for me, this time was a little bit too heavy. You know, we've talked before about foreshadowing in the previous episodes of the Sun Eater series, and I think this time it colours every interaction that Hadrian and Alexander have, this kind of early foreshadowing, and I kind of think I would have preferred to not kind of know where they're going to end up. In some senses, it kind of felt almost like a spoiler, and I've been really trying to avoid spoilers for this whole series. Like, I haven't looked up any reviews or any plot kind of synopses of any of the books after this. So apart from obviously that at some point he gets hungry and eats his son. So in the first act, we also get to see the Sielsin in a more natural environment for them, rather than kind of in these human environments, or I guess the Demiurge, would you call that a human environment? But it's not their natural environment. And that was all horrifying and all brilliant. I really enjoyed that. That was fantastic. Once again, this book absolutely smashes the first act out the park. Then moving into the second act, we have possibly kind of the most interesting part of the book, because the first act is kind of focuses around events and maybe a bit of action. And then the second act, we get into this political intrigue. To me, that was probably the most effective bit of the book. You know, some of the questions that are raised are, I think, good ones. We've just touched on earlier. What do you do with a person in your court who is a living legend, who has all these tales told about them? How do you deal with them? What is their place in this world? We get to see some payoff from some previous points that have happened in the first two books, which is delicious. It is so satisfying, really well executed. We also get to explore more of the world. We get to understand a bit more of what humanity was like pre-fall, I guess you'd call it, and you know, some of the things that led to that fall. That world building, that backfilling, I think is really good. There's still like an air of mystery around the fall of the Americani Empire, but some bits are kind of coloured in. And then we get to the third act, which was predominantly action, and actually to me was my least favourite part of the book. I kind of, if I'm really brutally honest, I think I actually got a bit bored. There's one kind of prolonged action sequence, which it was quite difficult to kind of work out what exactly the point of it was. I mean, it was cool to see Hadrian and Valka, you know, at their most capable, but you know, I just don't think action interests me very much. If we talk about Hyperion, for instance, like all of the tales in Hyperion, the ones that I found the least interesting were all the action ones. Maybe it's just my personal taste. I just, you know, don't really have much interest in action scenes in books, maybe. Or at least there needs to be a clear reason for them to be occurring. That gives you hopefully an idea of the plots, that without going too much into spoilers. Let's talk about characters. And we've mentioned Prince Alexander. He is probably the most interesting character in this book as they relate to Hadrian. We get to see a bit of how Hadrian's intentions, once again, are so pure with being this mentor figure to Alexander. His pure intentions often lead him to make bad decisions, and when there's now people who look up to him involved, it hurts. It's so frustrating, but it's also, we love that frustration. You know, that's the frustration that makes you want to keep reading. We get to see more of Valka. Hadrian and Valka, they've been together for a very long time. They've had basically a whole life together. Their relationship matures, and we get to see that kind of mature version of their relationship. I do think that she could have had perhaps more to do in the intrigue sections, and towards the end, in this third act, this action sequence, I didn't really love how Valka was used in that. We also have an introduction of a new alien race, or one that is perhaps mentioned before, but we get to see properly now, which is the Irhtani, which are these sort of pterodactyl-like creatures. And they're great. I love that Hadrian starts to treat them as they are Sielsin, and then realizes very quickly that his conceptions of the Sielsin as this, you know, that he cannot paint all these alien races with the same brush, that they have such different cultures, and that diversity, I think, only helps the book and helps the complexity of the book. So themes. This might be another reason why I didn't like this book as much as Howling Dark, because in Howling Dark it's really clear what the themes are, and all the plot points are working towards this same question, as in, what is humanity. What does it mean to be human? Whereas in this book, I couldn't really pick out a clear theme. It's kind of, I think this tends to happen with longer series that as the series progresses, the opportunities to explore these themes kind of become less available because you've written this long plot for a character and so much has happened to them and the world has grown in complexity and all of the plot points and all of the things that happen have grown in complexity that you spend so much time focusing on what's happening that it's difficult to bring in those themes, those deeper topics. Not to say it's without themes, but I don't think it was as tightly wound. So there's not actually that much to say about it, unfortunately. So we can move on to style, which is, I mean, once again, Christopher Ruocchio has the most fun style of writing. I really enjoy how overwrought everything is, and Hadrian's perspective is consistently entertaining. He is at his worst and his best. Now, that's the literary style, but I don't know if you could call this style, but when you come into the influences that Christopher Ruocchio has brought in here, I do think I was actually a little bit disappointed with how derivative some elements of this book were. You know, he's an author that definitely has influences, that isn't afraid to include them, and almost to make like a collage of his favourite sci-fi beats, which is, I think, okay. It did disappoint me in some areas though, most clearly in his allusions to Hyperion. I think in some elements, the Sun Eater saga compares favourably to Hyperion. If you've read Hyperion, you kind of feel like when you discover some of the secrets that this book has, you go like, I kind of read that before. When you have those key secrets to your book, you kind of hope that the author has come up with something original for them. There is originality in it, but it's not a wholly original secret, which I felt a bit let down by, to be honest. I'm intrigued to see what he does more with it, because I think he's sort of like a adopt and improve kind of guy. So I'm hoping that in Kingdoms of Death, there's more of him taking these ideas from Hyperion and then building upon them. So we'll see. I've just seen that Matt from Matt's Fancy Book Reviews has released a review for Kingdoms of Death that puts it in his top 10 books of all time, and it's difficult not to feel a little bit hyped by that. I am quite keen to get into that book and kind of see what Christopher Ruocchio has done. And the very last thing I want to mention is the narration, which this is the second book in the UK that we got that was narrated by Saul Reighthin, and the last one that we got by Saul Reighthin. I do think he did a really good job with these books. I was so concerned that he was miscast, but no, I think he actually had completely the right voice for it. The relish with which he played the parts of the Sielsin he has just the perfect prune squalor voice for it. I mean, I haven't heard even what Samuel Rugen's voice sounds like, so I mean, we'll see what it's like. Everyone seems to say that his voice is great, so I'm encouraged and hopeful and optimistic, but sad to say goodbye to Saul. Let's get on to the final thoughts and score. It's a flawed book, and coming from Howling Dark, I can't help but feel a little bit disappointed in that. That said, it's still one of the best books I've read this year. Christopher Ruocchio is an amazing author. I just think this one perhaps wasn't as much for me as Howling Dark was. So with that in mind, I'm going to give this one, I will give it, I think, 100 out of 120 Children of the Emperor. Doesn't quite get up to that kind of 5-star mark for me. There we go. Those are my thoughts on Demon in White. Very excited to continue. And don't forget, you can win yourself a first UK copy of Empire's Silence. There's a few more days left, so you can still enter the competition. It runs until the 11th of April, which is, I think, the UK release date for Disquiet Gods. If you haven't entered, go watch our videos in March, find the code word, get into the form that's in the description down below. No brainer. The clock's ticking, so make sure that you get your entry in soon. That's all that. Remember to go over to hardysbooks.co.uk and pick up one of our cool signed /antiquarian/modern first editions. Head over to @hardysbooks on Instagram or TikTok and give us a follow. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. And tune in next time, where Laura and I will be discussing A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie, the first book in the Age of Madness trilogy. In fact, speaking of Joe Abercrombie, why don't we go over to him now find out what he has to say on the subject.
Hello, I'm Jar Abercrombie, obviously, and I would like you to subscribe to Hardy's Books immediately, if not sooner than that.